Welcome to the Online Success Journey podcast, your opportunity to discover and learn from entrepreneurs like yourself. This is not your typical podcast, but a place where you can get the real story and find out how real people encounter speed bumps and detours, but journey through to find success. Now here's your host for the Online Success Journey podcast, Patience.
Welcome to the Online Success Journey podcast. This is episode 392. Make sure you click to subscribe right now so you'll never miss a journey. I post one episode each week and each guest has a fascinating story to tell. Joining us today is David Ewing. David is the founder of Motiv, a cutting-edge firm specializing in the Oracle C solution. David has a passion for leading with a heart and sharing his experiences, fostering deep relationships with others through his humor and storytelling. Hello, David.
Hello, Patience. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. My audience are excited to hear your story. Just start by telling us one thing we are going to learn from you today.
Yeah, absolutely, Patience. If there's one thing I can convey, it's that the best customer experience wins. Hands down. If you have the best customer experience, then in the bad times, when you need your customers to take care of you, they're going to be there for you. And any company is so much better off having half as many customers who absolutely love them as opposed to having twice as many customers where they feel ambivalent.
I can't wait to hear more about that. Let's get started with the basics. Can you tell my audience a little bit about your background, about what you did before you started your own business?
Yeah, I think I can summarize my background in 3 key phone calls that happened to me. So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and when I was 18, the phone rang and it was a football coach. And he said, "Son, how would you like to play football for Harvard?" And that changed my life forever. I had an opportunity to go to Harvard and not only just play football, which didn't last very long. I injured myself in 2 weeks, but I had a chance to learn from some of the best in a classical education at Harvard, and then also to do a bunch of engineering at MIT. The second major phone call came from my estranged aunt who lived out in California and called me in my junior year at Harvard and said, "You know what? You're my nephew. I don't know you very well. And if I don't find out how to know you now, I'll never get a chance. So how about you come out and visit California?" And that took me out to Silicon Valley, where I had an amazing time. And then, of course, that led me to go to Silicon Valley. And that's where I started my company. And I had a great time there. And then while I was in Silicon Valley, at first, I was working for another company. I worked for a venture capital and think tank called RB Weber, where I worked with some of the best companies in Silicon Valley. And then in the middle of the dot-com nuclear winter, when everything was shut down, I decided to start my own business. And the phone call I received that day was from one of our former clients, a guy who's one of the wealthiest people in the world, who called me and said, "How would you like to consult for 2 of my clients?" And that led me to start my company. So at age 24, in the middle of the dot-com nuclear winter, I began, and that's how I started Motiv.
Wow, you are blessed. What is into these phone calls?
Yeah, I've just been lucky enough to answer the phone, Patience. I guess that's all I can say.
Wow, what a background, David. But why do you do what you do?
I think that customer experience is magic. I think that when you do it right, you not only create a great business, but you touch people's lives. And all the time, I constantly ask people when I do workshops about customer journey, and I say, let's get in the right frame of mind, guys. Let's get ready to go. Let's think about some of the great experiences. We can all think about bad times when the airline didn't treat us right and we lost our luggage, or, all the different situations where things go wrong. But what about when things go right? And I get someone raising their hand and I say, share your experiences of what went well. And this is a classic that I get all the time. Someone raises their hand and this is what they say. In fact, this happened to me last month. This woman said, I had a wonderful dog for 12 years. I wish I remember the dog's name, but she was like, I love that dog. And, finally, after 12 years, the dog passed away. And Chewy Food.com noticed that I stopped ordering dog food. And I think they put two and two together and they sent me some flowers and a condolence card and said, we're very sorry for your loss. And, and then from there, she was in tears and she just told me, that was the most amazing thing ever. I am a customer of theirs for life. That's customer experience. That's a great story. I know a lot of people have heard it, but when you use your data to proactively address and reach out to your customers to do things like that, it creates bonds that just cannot be broken. And then, you don't necessarily have to compete on price or something else. You compete completely on, meeting the needs of your customer. And I think when you do that, that's amazing. That's magic. When I can do that for my customers, or when I can help my clients do that for their customers, I think that's just amazing. And that's why I do what I do.
What a story. Thank you for sharing. Let's put man aside. How do you know you are successful?
Well, I guess the best way to say that is one client at a time. I believe that people are only as good as their last performance. And I think that also I've had to readjust what I believe to be success is. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. I had a client once who called me and said, David, we have a huge problem. Problem is that we have a large call center and our customers are calling the call center and it takes them 5 to 7 minutes to get through all of the things that we need to do. We're very inefficient. We have to tell them, hold on a sec, I'm waiting for my system to do the thing. And it's a terrible experience and people are getting really frustrated and we're going to start losing our customers because it's just so miserable. They probably would rather call someone else. And I thought, okay, well, that's what we do. Let's get in here and figure this out. So we did the usual things and we went through the entire process and we rolled out the solution. And the new solution was far, far more efficient. It, if they had to do, 10 steps in the old process, it now was 2 steps. And if it took 5 minutes to do all the clicking and waiting in the old system, it now took 30 seconds. So we turned the system loose and we, trained everyone and we launched it and we waited with bated breath for the results. And so we called, made sure that everything was working correctly, went through all the stabilization period. And I checked in with the senior executive at my client. I said, hey, how's that call time going? Is it going down from 5 minutes? And he said, nope, still 5 minutes. And I thought, oh boy, this is bad. We had an idea that this was now going to be a 2-minute conversation, not a 5-minute conversation. So we looked at everything in our system. We made sure everything was working correctly. And then we went back and looked at it. And I called him 30 days later and said, hey, how are we doing? And he said, it's still 5 minutes. And I was really upset at this point because, if I'm trying to be successful and that was our measurement of success, then clearly we've now failed. So I call him and I say, hey, I want to come up to the call center and see what's going on myself. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, here's the thing. The old call was 5 minutes and the 5 minutes was mostly dead time on the air as our agents were talking to the person and saying, hold on a sec, I'm waiting for something. But now the call is 5 minutes, except that the system is so capable of giving them information that they are having a back and forth dialogue and talking about the best solution for this customer and what they can be doing. He said, the call is 5 minutes, but the order volume has doubled. And we are selling so much more per call than we ever sold before. This is the most successful project in the history of our company. And so that's just a huge win for me. But the lesson it taught me was, don't be so obsessed with the thing that you want that you wouldn't take something better. And I think if had any of us sat down at the beginning of that conversation and said, hey, how would we like to double our revenue per call? I think we would have much all preferred that. So we sort of got lucky. And I think that, when you measure success, I think that I always try to stay open to saying, don't be so obsessed with what I want that I wouldn't take something better. And that's how I measure success.
Sharing this experience that, yes, we shouldn't obsess of what we want. We should just settle for something. Someone will be like, but I want to make maybe 6-figure in 6 months. So they have to be patient.
Well, patience. I think that the answer to that question is don't be so obsessed with what you want that you wouldn't take something better. So if someone is just fixated on making 6 figures of income in 6 months and they wind up making 7 figures of income in 6 months, should they really be upset? The point is that I think that as we go through the adventure of improving things for our customers and making our businesses better, that we sometimes can get so obsessed with improving, one metric that we just overlook the fact that it's really only a means to an end. And there's really something else that everybody is really going for. The company I was talking about, they wanted more money, right? They wanted to grow revenue. They wanted to have more customers. They thought that cutting the amount of time per call would get them there. But it turns out that wasn't necessary at all. They didn't need to cut down the amount of time per call. They needed to increase the quality of the call. And that's exactly what we wound up doing. And it was obviously a combination of their successful and talented agents along with our systems that cut the amount of time down to go through the different steps in the process. But those two things together produced what we really all wanted, which was higher revenue for my client.
Thank you. Tell my audience about the magic moment, the day it suddenly all went right for you.
I think the most magic moment I've had in my career was, ironically, in the middle of the pandemic. And, we were all so stressed out and everybody was, so concerned with all of the global upheaval of the pandemic that, we were trying to stay balanced on our business. But in January of that year, I looked at our revenue growth. And this is January of 21. And I looked at our revenue growth through that first year of the pandemic. And I couldn't believe that we had some outstanding success. I mean, to be candid with you, I just was so worried about so many things that that year was kind of a blur for me. And when I looked up at the end of the year and realized, oh my gosh, the growth has been fantastic. And, we've done quite well. And not only this year, but for, several sustained years that I realized that I was qualifying for the Inc. 5000. And, but what the really highlight moment of that is my sister is also an entrepreneur, my sister, Jessica. And I called up Jessica and said, hey, I think I made the Inc. 5000 this year. And she also looked at her numbers and we looked at where the Inc. 5000 stood. And she said, I made the Inc. 5000 too. And I said, well, let's both apply. And so both my sister and I applied for the same year and both made the Inc. 5000 in the same year. And that was just kind of a really cool moment for us, a cool moment for two entrepreneur siblings, and a great moment to give back to our parents, to just say, hey, look what we did. And couldn't have gone more magical. Now, I will tell you, there's a little bit of cloud on that silver lining, and that is she crushed me on that list.
That's what I was waiting for.
Yeah. So I was like number 4,172, but she was number 77. So I was like, way to go. So yeah. So anyway, she massively showed me up on that, but hey, that everything could be perfect. But I felt like that was the magic moment for the two of us. And I was happy we got there together.
Wow. What a celebration. But what did you do differently or unique to get there?
Yeah. So the thing about customer experience, and I have to give my clients an amazing experience so that they can give their clients an amazing experience. The thing is it can't just be made of good intentions. You can't just say, gosh darn it, we're going to smile bigger and brighter, and we're going to try harder, and we're going to just do more. That is not a recipe for success. The key thing that every company needs to do is they need to really make sure that they understand at a foundational or atomic level what is kind of the core element of their delivery. And once we can understand that core element, like for example, at Motiv, there is an implementation and discovery process that we do of our entire system. And that is the atomic unit that has to go extremely well in order for us to be great. And so I think what we do that is really the magic for us is we have dialed in that process to make sure that for our clients, no stone is unturned, that we have a system to catch and help them discover the moments that matter for their customers. And then we can take advantage of that systematically to help them put in the right technology, the right scale, the right security, the right processes, the right training, and put all the pieces together so that when it's all said and done, everything is going to work and they're going to get the result that they were looking for. And I'll give you an example. Just earlier this year, we had a client who we met about a year ago, and we took them through that process. And along the way, they kept coming up with new ideas. And fortunately, in our system, we have a way to capture those new ideas and to adopt them into what we're doing because we're very agile. And as the project kept going, they kept making the project bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't want to give out any specific numbers, but they wound up spending 3 times as much money on the project as they originally had projected because they kept coming up with new ideas and adding things to it. However, the day we went live, it went off without a hitch. And they called me 3 weeks later and said, you know what, even though we spent 3 times as much as we thought we were going to spend, we just paid for it all back. And so we hit break even in 21 days. And now they're off to the races and they're incredibly successful. And so, those kinds of stories really kind of speak to, if you have the process correct and if you do things according to the steps, then 21-day return on investment, despite 3x a cost overrun, that's what we're looking for. That's why we're successful.
Thank you. David, tell us how to remain true to ourselves in the face of challenges.
Great question. How do you remain true to yourself in the face of challenges? Well, I have this belief, and it really comes from, it was tested the most in the pandemic. And the belief is simple. This is what it is. It's that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. It's a great quote. It's been attributed to a lot of people. I'm not exactly sure who the original person is. I think it was Charles Swindoll, to try and give credit where credit is due. But when you believe that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it, it means that every single thing that occurs to you not just it's not a challenge to whether you need to be true to yourself or not. It's an opportunity to express just how true you are to yourself. And when you think about it in those terms, it means that 9/10 of your energy is really spent being true to yourself and reacting to adverse events. And so, it reminds me of a story. There was this time in the pandemic when, everything was really bleak. And on a personal level for my family, we were all sitting at home. Everybody was stressed out. And I kept thinking, well, how do I react to this, right? If life is 10% what happens to me and the pandemic is only 10%, then how is my reaction 9 times bigger? What do I do to try and make this family have fun? And one thing we realized, well, no one was going to our 8,000 square foot office. Nobody. We were all, of course, at home. So I realized I could go to the office with my family. So we started going to the office every day as a family, and we brought Nerf guns with us, those silly Nerf guns that shoot the little soft pellets. And so we wound up, studying together and having Nerf gun battles across the office as a family. And it turned out that those are some of my favorite memories of that period. And it's really just because we didn't spend any extra money. We didn't do anything really that we needed to do, but we used our imagination and we reacted to the situation, and we became more true to ourselves because we were able to just be a great family while also dealing with extreme adversity.
But do you think, is this possible for employees to really be themselves in the workplaces? Because the culture also matters.
Well, when it comes to employees, quote, being themselves, I think that it really comes down to they should have no problem being themselves if they align with the core values, right? So, for example, we try to maintain a professional culture. And as a professional culture, if someone's, quote, definition was being themselves was wearing, torn jeans and a Metallica t-shirt, I think that's really cool in your personal life, but that's not the image we're trying to project at Motiv. So are you not being yourself if you're not dressed that way? Well, we have a core value at Motiv, and that core value is called standing ovation. And what standing ovation means to us is that, there are these key moments with our clients that matter, where you have to stand up and you have to deliver an exceptional result to the customer. And that standing ovation requires practice, skill, discipline, and support from a large team. And so to achieve a standing ovation at Motiv, you have to put all of those pieces together. And so I think that being true to oneself is making sure that every employee is at a company where they resonate with the core values. Not everybody wants to deliver standing ovations. Not everybody wants that to be a part of their life. But for those people who excel and are excited about that, Motiv is the right place for them. It's a place to have a standing ovation. And so they can be true to themselves and be at Motiv because they're in the right place. And if they're not, that's okay too. But they just have to go find that right place, and it may not be Motiv.
What have you learned from business as a whole?
I learned in my 20s when I first started that every single flaw that I have would be magnified times 10. And that it would be on display for everybody to see. And I think that I mean, I'll give you an example. In my 20s, did not have great emotional intelligence. And, the simple fact that things didn't go my way often resulted in me coming up with an outburst, expressing outrage, and, taking over and kind of countermanding people. I was not a very positive leader in my 20s. And those kinds of skills did me really well when I was an individual contributor, because I could come in, I could be a hero, I could save the day. But when you're trying to lead a team and you have those outbursts and you take control and you do everything yourself, you are actually undermining your team. You're crushing productivity. You're killing people's confidence. And so everything that I did was on display. And that weakness, that strength of it being an individual contributor, became a tremendous weakness as the leader of a team. And I had to learn how to overcome that. And so in my 30s, it was a different challenge. And in my 40s, it was yet another challenge. And so every single time I've grown as a leader, I have found that the things that got me this far are not the things that are going to get me to the next level. And I've had to adapt and change. And personal change, I think, is the hardest thing of all, because changing one's behaviors and how one conducts oneself, to not take the reins when there's trouble, but instead coach the team that's there. Those are hard things to learn. And as each of us learns them in business, we do get to the next level. But I tell you what, it's not easy for me, and I know it's not easy for other entrepreneurs.
David, tell us about the power of infectious energy.
Well, I would say that energy comes from somewhere, right? And when you enter a room, an entrepreneur always has to ask themselves, what am I trying to change by being here, right? And I believe that infectious energy is all about changing everyone's mindset from the world around me affects me, and instead says, no, I can actually change the world around me. I'm the source of change, not the world around me. And so infectious energy for me is all about making sure that people understand that, and I try to live that through my example, but also try to make sure that they have that as well. And I'll tell you where it comes from. It came from a quick story on this. When I was 16 years old, I was playing on a high school football team. And we went out for the very first game of the season. And this crosstown team, Farmington Harrison, they beat us at the Detroit Silverdome 35-0, I think. They just absolutely destroyed us. I mean, they pounded us into the ground. And it was absolutely devastating. And so the next week at practice, it's cold, it's Detroit, it's rainy. And, everybody had so low energy. There was no infectious energy except for one person. There was a 5'6" guy named Juan Hutchins, and Juan was mad as hell. He didn't play. He was on the second team. He never got to see any playtime, but he was furious with the entire team. And so he came out of the gate at every play, just hitting into our giant offensive line captain, Aaron, and just kept smashing him. And he wouldn't quit. And eventually the rest of us on the second team defense got excited, and we started smashing them, and we started really beating on the offense. And then that really got them mad. And then they started coming after us. And so before you know it, we went from being this whipped team with everybody hanging their heads to a bunch of frenzied animals going crazy, making things happen, all because of what Juan did. And as a result, we wound up winning our next game, and we wound up going to the state championship that year. And that's when I learned the power of Juan. Juan was the key. Juan was the one who changed that entire season on that one day, in that one practice, with all of his infectious energy. And so when you walk into a room as an entrepreneur, everybody has to be the Juan. They have to be Juan, and they have to go out and they have to make sure that everybody sees the energy and that they get that fire. And if you've got that fire, then good things start happening.
Tell us how the engineering background shaped your CEO.
Well, I think that engineering is probably the greatest concentration or major that anyone can have in college, not because everybody should be an engineer, but because engineers get a toolkit of problems that give them the confidence to go look at any situation in business and fix it. And I believe that the engineering toolkit is so versatile. And really what we need to know is that everyone who goes to college has to expect that everything that they're going to learn, except for the history, is going to change, right? Technology is moving at such a strong pace that if you spend 4 years in college and think that 20 years from later, all of that is going to be relevant, I've got news for you. It's not. I look at the things that we studied in college at Harvard and MIT, and I also happen to coach my son's robotics team in high school. And my son's robotics team is so far ahead of where I was after 4 years of Harvard and MIT that it's mind-boggling. And that was only, I'm not that old. It was only like 25 years ago. So engineering as a degree means that you have no limits around what you can go absorb. And with technology being such a dominant part of our life and our life going forward, I think that it means that I can get curious about a subject and I'm never intimidated to go in and look at it and learn about it and ask questions and talk to my clients about it and figure out what's going on. And I think that people who don't have a strong technical background oftentimes get afraid to ask questions. They get so overwhelmed by the wall of all the things that are in front of them that instead of trying, they just don't even try. And the reality is that with just a little bit of questionings and curiosity, most complex subjects can be broken down into simpler subjects. And eventually the simple truths of all of those come together. And that's when you really can kind of grasp things at a fundamental level so that you really can influence and make great innovations.
Let's talk about your business and how can we join you?
Yeah. So Motiv is a company dedicated to the belief that the best customer experience wins. And so what we do at Motiv is work with our clients to help them understand the journey that their customers go through. And then we pinpoint the moments that matter and bring the solutions to bear that will make that customer experience truly outstanding. So whether it's technology or business process or training and know-how, we bring all of it together in a scalable and secure way so that customer experience becomes a lot more than just a motivational speech or good intention, but instead becomes a dominant, systematic process that influences your customers so that every customer gets a great outcome every time. And anyone who's interested in learning more about how to work with us can go to our website, which is motivcx.com. That's CX like customer experience. So it's called CX for short, motivcx.com. And at motivcx.com, we introduce a lot of the concepts that we have around how we map a customer's what we call their hourglass. So it's more than just a sales funnel, but from the moment you meet a customer for the very first time, or impress upon them all the way through the point where they are telling their friends just how wonderful your product is and referring you all over the place. What are all the steps that go into that? And how do you make sure that you are successful along the way? And that's how customers get started with us. So usually the first action is that people come to our website. They start learning about us from there. We have a lot of free resources. And then from there, companies typically engage with us for a free assessment of their entire process, and we chart out a map for them for the next 3 years of how they can be successful in their business.
Thank you. There will be more from David in a moment. If you are encouraged by David's journey, please go to my website at onlinesuccessjourney.com, where you will find more amazing free content. Are you struggling to achieve one or more of your major goals? Do things like fear, confusion, and overwhelm get in the way? Then maybe I can help. I work with clients to support them get unstuck and make massive leaps forward to create their dream life. Go to onlinesuccessjourney.com/coaching and let's chat on Zoom to see if we are the right fit for each other. That's onlinesuccessjourney.com/coaching. Now, David, I would love for you to share more with my audience.
Well, I think the thing that I've been working on the most lately is my own internal dialogue and my ability to stay positive by myself. And so about 3 months ago, I had a chance to meet this woman named Molly Bloom. And I don't know if you've heard of Molly Bloom, but there was a movie that came out about her called Molly's Game. And her story in a nutshell is that she was an Olympic athlete who was getting ready to go to the Olympics as a skier. She broke her back. And then after that, went to college. Her Olympic dreams were shattered, went to LA, and then got involved in online poker. And she developed one of the world's largest illegal poker games for which she ultimately got caught and had to go through an extensive process to get released from that. But along the way, she had an amazing story, and I met her and had a chance to talk with Molly. And one of the things that I was most intrigued about is Molly did try to come back after she broke her back to try and become an Olympic athlete. And her dad was her coach, very hard driving guy who was also a psychologist. And she said to her dad, she said, I have this voice in my head, and this voice is, it's undermining me. It's telling me I can't do it. It's telling me that I'm going to crash again, that I'm going to break my back again, that I can't get there. And what she said next is what's really changed my life recently, which is her dad told her there's nothing wrong with having a voice in your head. We all do. But what is wrong with it is if you're not talking back to it, right? You have to shut it down. And I found, for some reason, that was such an epiphany to me, because I think that I am a bit of a perfectionist. I insist on having great customer experience for my clients and also for their customers. And I have always wanted that so much so that I'm very, very critical of myself. And that voice is in my head all the time telling me that it's not good enough, that I'm not good enough, that I could have done more, that there should be more here, that, there's just, it always finds all the things that are wrong. And the idea that I would just talk back to it and has given me so much peace because every night before I go to bed, I meditate and I think about the day and did I do enough and did I get everything right? And is everything going in the right spot? And that voice kicks in every night and it starts telling me the litany of things that didn't go according to plan. But just being able to talk back to it has given me a chance to be stronger, to be more concrete in my actions as I go into the next day. And I feel like that has helped me in my personal success more than anything else that I've done recently. And I owe it all to Molly Bloom and her crazy story about illegal poker. So thank you, Molly.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. If your business was down to its last $100, how would you invest it?
Great question. If my business is down to the last $100, I invest it in innovation. Because if I'm down to $100, I'm not doing anything that anybody else is doing, and I've got to do something different. So if I can, I've got to find a way to change things, to do something unique for somebody, because clearly on a backward sliding business like that, that's the thing that you need to find. And, at the beginning of this call, we talked about the idea that you're better off with half as many customers who love you as opposed to twice as many customers who are ambivalent. And if you're down to that last $100, then go find the customer or two or three that are the key ones who will absolutely love what you have to offer. And if you can offer them something that turns into magic, you will build that business back up, because now you'll build it on the backs of customers who are diehard advocates of what you've done for them and how you've changed their lives. And that can't be broken.
What is the best business book you have ever read?
Easy question for that one. So it's The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I absolutely love that by, it's not by Andreessen Horowitz, it's by Ben Horowitz. And he's from Andreessen Horowitz. It's an investment studio. But what I love about that book is that it's very raw. I mean, I've never read a business book that started out with gangster rap lyrics at the start of every chapter, but that's how Ben starts each chapter. And it's because he's setting an intensity about business that I absolutely love. I think I've never met Ben Horowitz. I really want to meet him one day, but I think that he's full contact. He would be the equivalent of a bare knuckle prize fighter if he was not a business investor. And he wrote his book that way. And his experience throughout the book is not a tale of like success after success. And then he did this great thing and he did that great thing. It's a story of woe. It is a story of major challenge, of being ripped apart and having to lay off lots of people and having to make incredible moves that are very difficult under tremendous amounts of pressure. And I think it's just a very powerful story that is a tremendous gift. And he does talk about the things that you can do when things are going well and you've got a growth mindset and everything's positive. He also talks about exactly what you need to do when things are not going well, when the world is against you and every one of your competitors is eating your lunch. And how do you actually bounce back in a bad economy? And what do you have to do to pivot? And I think it's that flexibility that makes that book so much greater than any book that is, the 10 steps to doing this or that. it is a powerful, powerful tour de force of what it's like to be the CEO of a company. The hard thing about hard things.
Thank you. If you had a little note in your pocket, what would that be?
If I had a little note in my pocket, it would be life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it, which I've already talked about. So, but really to me, the other things that I would say that kind of go hand in hand with that is, there's a great expression. I've heard that it's a Chinese expression, but it says, with crisis comes opportunity. And, it all gets to the same idea, which is the things that are creating adversity in life today, the things that are really, seemingly, quote, ruining your life are the sources of growth. And, when how many times have you sat down with someone over dinner and they say, it seemed terrible at the time, but I went through this terrible thing and the result, I have this great thing now. And I think that's true of life. And it's hard to remember that in the moment when you're going through terrible experiences. But it is that those terrible experiences are the crucible that really help us all become better than we are today.
Do you feel like you succeeded or like you're only on the way?
Well, succeeded is a past tense verb, right? So if I succeeded, I feel like I'd be done, and I'm not done. So no, I don't think I've succeeded in that sense. I think I've had many successes, but I think I'm on the way. And, the journey is something that I think is really the best part of life. And, last week, I had the great fortune of spending a full day with Vicente Fox. Vicente is the former president of Mexico. He was, the first president of Mexico who had bucked 71 years of one-party rule. And as I sat down with this, Vicente is now 81 years old. And if there was anybody in life who you could say they have succeeded, past tense, I think he'd be him. I mean, clearly after a storied career, president of Mexico, all the great things he did for the country of Mexico, what a wonderful guy. And yet here he is, and he is out talking about how he's dedicated to serving others and how he believes that there's another chapter to the relationship between the United States and Mexico and how we can make each other better. And spending time with him, I took him on a tour of lots of different technology institutions and other places so that he could see what was going on, so that he could, help the idea of making Mexico more competitive and better. And he's not done yet. He's still going, and he's 81. And I just think that that's inspiring. So I'm not 81, but when I am, I'd love to be just as fired up and just as energetic as Vicente.
Thank you. As we come to the end of our interview, what additional wisdom would you like to share with our listeners?
Well, I think that I take inspiration from the people around me. And one of the people that I spend a lot of time with is my sister, Jessica, the aforementioned entrepreneur who beat me on the Inc. 5000. And, Jessica has this mantra, this belief that the person who dies with the best stories wins. And I just think that's one of the most poetic and cool things I've ever heard of in my life. So if you're going to have great stories in life, if you're going to die with the best stories, well, those stories are going to involve you really coming close to the edge a lot and pulling back and making things happen. And in life, let's face it, sometimes we pull back from the edge and we have this thrilling adventure. Sometimes we go over the edge, right? And we fail. And so I think that I try to channel my sister's positivity around failure and the idea that if I'm going to die with the best stories possible, it's because I'm going to push all the way to the edge, and sometimes I'm going to go over. And that doesn't bother me like it used to. I used to be a perfectionist. I used to be someone who insisted that every single time I pushed to the edge, I made it back okay. And while I'm never okay with going over the edge, I push a lot harder towards it because I'm not so worried about the failure. I'm more interested in having the great story.
Thank you. Remind us how we can connect with you.
The best way to connect with me, and I love connecting with people in business, is to get me on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, it's super easy. Go to linkedin.com/IN/David G. Ewing, and you'll find me right there.
Thank you. David, it's been great to have you to share your online success journey with us.
Well, thank you, Patience. This has been a pleasure.
You are welcome. Remember, success is a journey. Don't wait. Let's start the journey. Patience and David.
this is not the end of the journey. We hope you've enjoyed listening to Patience and her guest and want you to know that there are hundreds of episodes available at onlinesuccessjourney.com. Patience would like to thank you for listening to the podcast, and she has a free gift for you on her website, including an audio compilation of her guests' best tips, uplifting stories, and even a bit of fun. Additionally, there are special clips of over 250 episodes that have never aired on the podcast and are only available to members of the Online Success Journey. Check the website and click on Join Now to get free and instant access. Of course, you know that listening to the journeys of others helps us each chart our own path. So make sure you're subscribed on the favorite platform you have to be notified as each new interview is posted. There are so many ways to stay connected to the Online Success Journey and listen in. And if you're enjoying the podcast, we appreciate your help in telling others. One of the best ways to share the benefit you get is to rate and review the podcast at Apple Podcasts and other sites. We appreciate your help and your willingness to share the journey. One last thing. If you're feeling a bit lost or overwhelmed on your own journey, Patience can help. Check out our coaching sessions on how to set goals and double your productivity while you're at the website. Working with Patience is a great way to get back on the right path. On behalf of Patience, and until next time, thanks once more for listening. It is our hope that this podcast will guide you on your own online success journey.